Hi and welcome to Just Ask Dad. In this video I'm just going to show you how to do a few maintenance checks on your car. I'm going to start off with showing you how to do an oil check. Ordinarily I would make sure the engine is cold, so it hasn't been run for a while, it's been allowed to cool down. But I've just checked the manual on my car here, which is a Kia Soul, and it says run the engine until it's warm. And then wait 5 minutes before doing the oil check. So I'm going to do that with my car now. I think I could probably do it from cold and get the same result, but I'll follow the instructions in the manual. So I'm just going to let the car run for a couple of minutes. Whilst we're doing that, we'll pop the bonnet, and my bonnet switch here, it's just there. I've now let the engine cool down for a few minutes and I'm ready to check the oil. So before I do that, the reason why we need to check the oil is because the engine is made up of lots of metal components. So if you think, there's lots of metal components there moving together inside the engine. The engine's underneath this cover here, and the oil lubricates those metal components to stop them from seizing up. So the oil is really important. To measure the engine oil, each engine will have one of these. This is called a dipstick. So this is a little metal rod that goes into the base of the engine, and it allows you to tell how much oil is inside the actual engine. So I'm going to pull this out. And as you can see there, we've got oil all over the place. So I'm now going to clean this dipstick and then put it back in to get a true measurement of the oil, because the oil moves around when the engine was running, which is why we can see it all the way up the top of the dipstick as well. So I've got my dipstick here. I'm going to use a little bit of tissue, and I'm just going to wipe all of that oil off. And so my dipstick now is clean. So if we look at the dipstick, I'll just try and focus there. You can see the end has an F and an ow. So when we put the oil in, that's to tell us whether it's full or whether it's low. So I'm going to put the dipstick back in, and if the oil comes up beyond this point, then I have too much oil in. If it comes to here or lower, then I don't have enough. So I'm going to push the dipstick all the way down until it's slotted in, and then I take it out again and have a look. So we can see on this one, it's exactly where it should be. It's right on the full mark, and that's brilliant, because that means I'm not running too low and I haven't overfilled it either. So I'm happy with that, and I'm going to put the dipstick back. So what do we do if the oil was too low or too high? Well, if the oil is too high, you risk damaging your engine. With too much oil in the engine, it could be like a kettle. If you think of a kettle, if you overfill a kettle and then try and boil it, what will happen is the lid will either pop off or the lid will bubble and allow water to seep out the top, and that's what you don't want. If that happens with your engine and you've put too much oil in it, the engine could explode or burst the seal, and that will cost you lots of money. So the last thing you want to do is overfill your engine. Likewise, if you underfill your engine, you could have similar problems. With not enough oil in lubricating the engine parts, the engine could seize. Once again, your engine will be knackered and you'd be looking at paying out for a new engine. And if you have a low value car, it's quite possible that the cost of a new engine will be nearly as much as the car, which would make it unviable. So always check your oil. If you find that your oil is low, this is where you will top it up. This big cap here normally has a little oil symbol on it, so it's quite easy to find, and it will be on your engine bay. So we simply unscrew that. That comes off, and you can see there's oil there. Most oil that you can buy will come in containers, and it'll have a visible marking on the side showing you how much oil is in there. This one's a 4 litre container, and as you can see I've got 4 litres in there. This one's unopened. Most stores will sell oil, but the type of oil you will need to check. Unfortunately, different engines require different oils, so you need to check in your manual to find out which oil you need for your car, because they are not all the same. Sometimes it would depend on where you're driving the car. So if you're in a hot climate, you will need a different type of oil to a car that you may be driving in a colder climate. Many bottles of oil come with an easy to use cap. So you pull it up. It's easy to use with 2 hands. And unscrew it. And then you have a nice nozzle for pouring in. You would then pour the oil directly into your engine there. I'm not going to do that right now because I know that my engine has enough oil in it. If your oil doesn't have that cap on it, which will help you to pour it, you can always use a funnel. In the event that you get any oil around the edge here, just use a bit of tissue to wipe it off. This is important because any oil that you spill around the edges will eventually burn off when the engine gets hot. That will cause some smoke, which will then go into your ventilation system, and you'll smell burning whilst you're driving the car. Unless you spill lots and lots of oil, it's unlikely to catch fire, but nevertheless it's always safer to just wipe any excess oil off. When putting the oil cap back, it's important to make sure that you do it up tightly. Mine has a little clicking mechanism, so I know when it's done up properly. How much oil you put in will depend on what size engine you have, and it is better to put little bits in at a time rather than overfilling it. So I would suggest you have a look and on your side of your container, and perhaps put in maybe 1/4 litre, and then what you do is you wait for that to sink down to the bottom of the engine sump. Probably wait for a couple of minutes, and then go ahead and check your oil again, and do it like that in stages. 1/4 litre, check your oil. 1/4 litre, check your oil. You do have to give the oil time to sink to the bottom of the engine into the oil sump, so don't be impatient if you pour some in and it hasn't gone down straight away onto your dipstick. You need to wait a minute or two and let the oil sink through. When replacing the dipstick, make sure that you have pushed it down firmly and it is in tight. And that's how you check your oil. I hope that's helped. The next thing I'm going to check is the level of wash in my windscreen washers. Now you'll see under the engine bay that you'll have a few other caps. This one here on mine is called the radiator cap. This is for water that flows around the outside of the engine to keep it cool. This other cap here is my brake and clutch fluid cap. This is for brake and clutch fluid, and hopefully we will try and cover that later on. The cap I'm looking for right now is this one. This one's my windscreen washer cap. and as you can see, it's got a little windscreen washer icon at the top. Most new cars have that now, so it's quite easy to find. So I'm going to pop that cap off. And this one comes with a measuring stick in it as well. They don't all have that. And that can tell me how full it is. So it's a bit like my oil dipstick. I can see there that it's only about halfway full, so I'm going to fill it up. So you can buy pre-made screen wash from good car stores. Sometimes it's containers full and it's already pre-mixed with water, so all you have to do is pour it. You can buy concentrate, which you add to water and then pour it in. That's what I've got here. I've got a jug of water with some concentrate screen wash in it, and I'm just going to add that. So this has quite a big screen wash bottle. Not all cars have big bottles. And I've just used 2 litres there, and it's still not full up. So I'm going to go and get some more of that and just top it up. So I filled my screen wash bottle up, and as you can see, I filled it right to the top. It doesn't matter if you overfill this one to the measuring stick, because it still gets pumped through to your windscreen wipers. Now what you might find on some of yours is you have a little filter here on the cap, and that's to filter the water before it goes through. If mine did have it, it's gone now, but I know a lot of cars do have those. What you do is you pour your water over the filter, and it just filters out any sort of small pieces of debris that's in there. So what I'm going to do now is just push that back on. Just put it up. Yep, that's on nice and tight. So I know that that's all filled up. Now that's kind of handy if you're going to be doing long journeys, but it's important to be able to keep your windscreen clean at all times. And that's how you fill up your windscreen washer. The next bottle in your engine bay that we're going to look at is your brake and clutch fluid bottle. And on my car it's this one here. This one's really important. It controls the fluid, which controls the hydraulics in your brakes, and it also controls the fluid that makes the clutch work. So this bottle here has a black cap which just unscrews, and in there is the brake and clutch fluid. Now these bottles will have a little indicator sign somewhere on them. On mine it's just there, and you can see, I don't know if you can see that clearly, that says max. Some of them will have a minimum and a max. Mine, oh yep, it does have a minimum just here along the side there. I'll try and zoom in. So my fluid should be no lower than that line and no higher than this line. And as we can see, it's just nicely at the top there. A couple of points to note when you're checking your brake and clutch fluid. Don't leave the cap off for too long. Okay, when this is exposed to too much air, it can deteriorate the quality of it. So just take your cap off, manually check, and then put it back on. Also, if you find that you are running low on this, you can buy obviously replacement brake and clutch fluid. But again, like engine oil, there are different varieties, and you need to make sure that the one that you're going to get is the one that's suitable for the car. So once again, refer to the manual. Also, with some brake and clutch fluids, they can't be mixed. So again, check on the fluid that you're buying to see if it can be mixed with other brake and clutch fluids. So that's the brake and clutch fluid reservoir, and that's looking good so far. The last thing I'm going to check under my engine bay is my water. So the water is important. The engine, if we discussed earlier, is all made of metal, and inside it, if we consider this piece of tissue as the engine, inside the engine we've got the oil, which allows the metal parts in the engine to move around. But there's also an outer shell of the engine, which we'll call my hand, and in between the engine and the outer shell, the water is pumped around, and the water is there to cool the engine down, to keep it cool. So normally the water is pumped, it's kept cool because it goes around a fan that's at the front of your car. So as you're driving along, the cold air hits the radiator, which is where the water sits, to keep the water cool, and then that cool water is then pumped around your engine, and then it comes back up through the radiator. So the cold water comes through, goes around your engine, cools the engine down, but the water gets warm, so then it comes back out of the engine through your radiator where it cools down again, and then begins the cycle once again. So many cars have radiator caps, radiator bottles that are like this bottle here. So they might be somewhere in the front, and they'll have a minimum and a maximum sign on them. On my car I don't have that. I have a simple cap here which is right at the front. Now this is a push down and turn round cap, and they can be a bit tricky sometimes. You just turn them once and they won't come round. So you turn them once and you have to push it down, turn it again, and it's in like 3 stages where you push it down, turn it, and then when I take it off, this is the water that's cooling my engine. And as you can see, that's right at the top, which is where it should be. If you can see it, if it's a bit, you know, like a centimetre lower or something like that, that's fine as well. It's when you undo this and you can't see any water in there, that probably means your water's low. But like I said, a lot of cars now have the reservoirs, so they have that bottle, and it's normally around the front here somewhere, and you can see quite clearly the level of water that's in there. So a couple of safety points when checking your water on your car. Do not do it when the car is hot or when the engine is hot. So you must have left your car for a, you know, if you've been driving it, leave it for a good half hour to cool down. This is really important, because if you open the cap when the engine's hot, the water pressure in there will be boiling hot, and it's going to burst out, and it's going to spray you, it's going to hurt you, it's going to cause burns. It can be really dangerous. So you only can check your water when the car's cold. Okay, so please bear that in mind when you're going to do your engine maintenance and your checks. Only lift the cap off of the water when you know the engine's cold. This is where my water is for my engine coolant, and that's fine. Should you find that your water level is low, you can there's a couple of things that you're going to need to bear in mind when you top it up. So while some people do just use ordinary tap water, it's not recommended by any manufacturer for you to do that. And so the reason for that is because the engine's all made of metal, and the tap water that you put into your radiator can cause rust and corrosion to the engine. So they advise that you use distilled water. So from any good car shops, you can buy bottles of distilled water. If you don't want to do that, what you can do is boil some water in a kettle at home and allow that to cool down, and use that. Maybe boil it a couple of times to make sure you get rid of all the impurities out of it. And that can be just as effective as buying distilled water from a car parts shop. Also, as well as adding water, you need to add what's called coolant. So again, you get this from a car parts shop. You can't make it yourself, and you follow the instructions on the coolant bottle, and it will tell you how much to use and how much water to use. So normally you would mix it beforehand, perhaps use a little jug like this, and it will say something like 50% coolant, 50% water. So you mix it in the jug first, and then you pour it into your radiator bottle, until it's full up. But it is important that you add coolant. The coolant does two things. It basically stops the water from freezing if you're living in very cold temperatures, because you don't want your water to just freeze up. If you use just ordinary water, and you live perhaps in Canada or something and the temperature's really cold, that water will freeze. So the coolant stops it from freezing. And the coolant also works in the other direction as well. So when it's really hot weather, it also stops the water from combusting too much whilst it's cooling the engine. So the coolant's really important. But again, check your manual and find out which coolant you need, or you can go to your local car parts store and they'll probably be able to look on a computer and tell you which one you need. So today we've looked at some basic maintenance checks that you can do for your car. We looked at checking the oil using your dipstick and topping up your oil if you need to. We looked at filling up your windscreen washer bottle so that your car can always have a clean windscreen no matter what driving conditions. We also looked at your clutch and brake fluid, important one there to check as it powers your brakes. Important to make sure that that's at the right level, and we saw that we had a minimum and a maximum level. And the last thing that we looked at was our water cooler for the engine, and on this model we have just a cap here at the top, but on many models you'll find a water coolant bottle with a minimum and maximum sign, just like the clutch reservoir. And I hope that helps.